Hello to you there and welcome to another episode of Sport Views being put on by Sportt TT and TTT Limited. I'm Sachin Ramsubang and alongside me, I wouldn't want to say he's being put in the hot seat because we're very close to the pool.
Yes.
So I'm going to say we're putting in the cool seat today.
The cool seat, yes.
Yes, Director Hayden Mitchell, thank you for sparing some time with us today, sir.
It's a pleasure, Sachin. We look forward to communicating and sharing the gospel of Sportt Company.
Oh yes. This conversation continues to be a very major one as it pertains to sport in Trinidad. And we're talking sport, sport tourism, ecotourism, everything else as it involves sport as well. And, but before we jump into the nitty-gritty of things, tell me, why did you choose to get involved in sport?
Oh, well, that's a loaded question. Eh? You have kids?
I don't.
Oh, gosh.
I have two furry ones, though.
You have two furry ones.
Yes.
I've always been a sportsman. I went to QRC, and in QRC, I fell in love with sports. So I played from football under 16. I played field events, from discus, shot put, javelin. I didn't say I was good at any, but I participated in them.
That's important. The participation is important.
That's it. I played basketball, so I've always been into sports. At UWE, I was in the basketball team, so I've always been into sports. So I've been blessed with two boys, and at I understand the importance of having boys being active in sports, So it just so happened that, their grandparents love tennis. Right, and I was never into tennis, and because of the love of tennis, and each time we go by them, they're watching tennis on TV. My boys fell in love with tennis, so I was thrust into it, into tennis.
Interesting. Interesting that you mentioned you played all sport as well, and now you are director, one of the persons who are given the charges of handling all sport as well.
Correct.
So you have a bit of everything involved with you as well. But as it pertains to tennis in particular,
yes,
you're also a part of the NGB as well.
Well, yeah. I am the president of the Tennis Association. I'm also a director on the regional body for ITF, which is called COTEC. So I was just re-elected onto the board. So that is for Central America and the Caribbean. And I'm also on the ITF committee for beach tennis in this region. So I am very much involved in tennis as we speak.
Very nice. Tennis is a very interesting sport because it may not be the most popular sport in Trinidad, but it has grown tremendously over the last decade or so.
Yeah.
And with the advent of the facility that we have called the Racket Center, it's a phenomenal facility. I'm sure you would like to share some light on that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. When I first came on board as the tennis president, that is when we now got the tennis center handed over, in conjunction with Sportt Company to work to develop the center. And we had an interesting situation. We had a new executive. We had an executive that wanted to take tennis places, and then we had this big racket facility. And at the point in time that we came in, there really was no clear plan from the previous administration, this is on the tennis side, as to how we were going to develop that facility. So when we came in, I told everybody that, listen, this is going to be a 4-year thing. It's not going to happen within the next 2 years. It's going to take us 4 years to get us where we need to be. So we then set out to do a strategic plan. We worked with ITF over those years to develop a plan to develop the center into what it is going to be very soon, which we are quite excited about. It's going to be a bronze certified ITF training facility. And really that in itself, we will be the only one in this region, and I'm talking about Central America, to have an ITF certified facility. That in itself is an accomplishment, and it took a lot of personal sacrifice. A lot of sacrifice from my executive, because if you imagine, Trinidad has never done anything like this before, right? So of course, when you're looking into change management, because that's what it was, we now had to break the mold, and we had to come in and think very differently.
When Trinidadians think bronze, they think third place.
Oh.
But I mean, this achievement is a phenomenal one for any governing body, as a matter of fact, but more so in Trinidad. We have now reached a point where we are certifying various facilities.
Correct.
And you're talking from your perspective as the tennis president.
Correct.
What does this mean for persons who are unsure, who are viewing and they're saying, man, bronze is third place. Why can't we get a gold medal?
Right, so really it's a stepping stone, right? So there are 3 levels in terms of certification, and each sport and discipline is different. FINA, which is swimming, is different to UCI,
Yes.
which is different in terms of their structure. For tennis and ITF, you have to go to 3 levels. So the first level is bronze, and that encompasses a range of items. It looks at facilities. So it not only looks at your facilities, it looks at your structure in place, because if it is you do not have a permanent structure, you're talking about human resources to manage the facilities, they do not give you the certification. It then looks at the equipment. It looks at the programs that you're running. It then looks at all the tournaments that you're starting to have, because you could imagine these international federations, when you put that stamp on it, right, it speaks to a specific standard, a standard of the facility. So anybody who comes down, so if we invite tour players who want to go and play the Australian Open just in January, if we invite them down and we advertise this, and this is an ITF bronze level certified facility, they expect a certain standard, and you must have those things in place when they come down, and which is part of our strategic plan. I just gave you a little hint, right? As part of the plan.
Is it something that will be placed on the world governing body for the sport, their website? If coaches, managers of the various territorial teams would like to come to train to a weather-friendly place, will it be placed on their website to say, hey, Trinidad and Tobago, they have this facility, the weather is perfect, no snow, no cold weather, that kind of thing, so you guys can go there and train?
Correct. So this certification and all certifications is really a marketing tool, right? So, it depends on how Trinidad uses it. So talking to the ITF on their website, they will have all the facilities throughout the world that are certified, whether it is Australia, USA, all the facilities will be certified. That also gives us a footing, because that also gives us an advantage in terms of the level of competition that we can have. So for instance, if we are competing against another facility in the world that is not certified, ITF will give us the edge in terms of hosting, in terms of holding tournaments, in terms of coaching development. It is a standard. So once you have this standard, it's a definite advantage.
Now, as we look to get international accreditation for local facilities, should training of persons be done locally, or do you seek international attention for this training of personnel to man these facilities? Because as you made mention, the facility itself is one, but having the human resource to take care of it is another, and that all ties into the various accreditation, bronze, silver, gold, as the case may be.
Right. So part of having all these facilities being accredited is to bring people to Trinidad.
Okay.
Right. The thing is, we want to create revenue, foreign exchange. We want people to come to Trinidad. So that is a major trust for us. We have done so many studies in terms of the potential revenue that sports has. We as Trinidadians, and I'm talking, as a Trinidadian now, not as a president or on the board.
Yes.
We have a lot of potential in Trinidad, and I'm talking about assets. We have, per capita, yes, we have the most per capita. However, we have a strategic advantage as well. One is the weather. One is our geographic location. So we have access to Central America, South America, and the Americas. So once we manage or we develop programs that take advantage of our strategic advantage, Trinidad is going to take off in terms of sports.
Local coaches being trained for the professional standard or international standard, how difficult of a task is this?
In development is a process, right? And there are key pillars in development. One of the pillars is coaching and coaching development. We recognize that very early. When we came into office, we identified people who could be trained as tutors, people who could be trained as coaches. And I must also tell you that, through our head of coaching development, which is Kyle Hannes, right? Trinidad, again, is the only country in this region, Central America and the Caribbean, to have a bronze certification in coaching development. What that means is that Trinidad is now able to run coaching courses on behalf of ITF. So again, it was part of our strategic plan. As I said, it would have taken us 4 years. So we had to send our coaches away, who we identified who could be these tutors, to Spain to train. We got a lot of help from the Olympic Solidarity Fund, so thanks to TTOC. So now we brought them back here. We are now able to certify coaches. So we could actually bring coaches from the region and train them right here in Trinidad. Part of the issue in terms of athlete development is that they had to go away to train. So let's look at tennis. There are two things that really develop tennis players. One is access to competition, and then the other is access to coaching, right? Proper coaching. We identified very early that there was a gap in our coaching. We have addressed that gap. So we expect in the coming years to see higher quality players coming out of Trinidad and Tobago. Before the pandemic, actually, we started to see the fruits of our labor. We have had a junior development program, which was self-funded, and we had development happening at the lower levels. So you're talking about from under 10 to under 12 to under 14. And what that has done is we are now seeing 3 years later the results of it, where we have top female players, under 14 players, reaching the Masters in this region, going to Mexico for the Masters, which has never been done before. So again, it's a process, but people have to understand what the process is. It's not a sexy process, right? Because Trinidadians, they want to see it now.
Yes.
But you have to develop your coaches. You have to educate your parents, because remember, the parents spend a lot of time with the kids. So if the parents themselves don't understand the process, then they are not going to be reinforcing it at home. So we have to educate the parents. We have to train our coaches. And then we have to make sure our facilities are up to mark. So it's not one thing. It's, they say it takes a village to raise a child. That is true for a sportsman. It takes the whole community to raise one sports person.
It's amazing that you brought up the point about the various youth level categories, under 12, under 16, under 10, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And recently we've seen some really magnificent performances, especially at the under 16 level.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that experience and the work that goes behind the scenes, because as you rightfully mentioned, persons who would love to see their children be great sportsmen and sportswomen, they don't know or they don't understand the level of work that goes behind this entire process. And you just listed out the entire process, which is just part of it.
Yes.
So tell us a bit about the experiences about the under 16 level being so great.
Yeah, we've had so many successes in tennis and in sports in general, but really, as you said, the process to get there, people don't understand. It's a lot of sacrifice. I want to start with the parents, because the parents themselves it's a financial sacrifice. It's time, because you have to, as a parent, I'm a parent as well as of athletes. They mightn't see themselves as athletes, but they're athletes, right? These kids, right? But you have to put a lot of time into reinforcing what they're doing, their diet at home. An athlete's diet is not the same diet that a normal person will be doing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of sacrifice. The time it takes to train. So you're talking about weekends, you're talking about during the week. So where some kids may be going to kids' parties and that kind of thing, you as an athlete, you have to sacrifice a lot of things. So you have to find a work-life balance between that. And for this young generation who wants everything now, that may be a challenge, so the parents play a great deal in it. The other thing is that you have to have an association that really understands the process, and, I want to talk about associations a little bit, because, sometimes associations is like Russian roulette, right? Because you're not going to know what you're getting, In our case, we were quite happy to get an association where everybody was on the same page. So we're able to put the athletes first. So we have the parents who are doing their part. The association now has to develop a pathway for those athletes to perform, because you can't be training all the time and then you really don't have a pathway. So it took a lot of work. We had to put on, within the last 4 years, let's look at 2019, we put on 7 international events. And this is just with an executive of 5 people, right? We put on 7 international events, and those international events were the stepping stones for those athletes to gain points. So what you saw is parents doing their job, then you had the association putting on events, making sure they had access to these events. We then had a national program where these players came through. So whereas we took the best players in Trinidad, we put them together, right? And we had a whole training session with them. So this was week in, week out, and that was that. And then of course you need governmental support. You also need the support of sport company and the government, because these kids have to have access to go to tournaments outside. So all those things, we call it the sporting ecosystem. Those things have to be in place for these athletes to perform. So
sorry to cut you across, but coming off this very successful time that you've had with the under 16 level, and I'm sure with other levels as well, as a very small executive, quote unquote small executive as the NGB, what advice would you have for other NGBs who would like to get this same or similar or maybe even better results? What advice do you have for their executive boards?
You have to make sure the executive is on the same page. I don't know if you know how sometimes some of the NGBs, how they are elected. Sometimes you go with a slate, sometimes you might get everybody, and sometimes you go with a slate and you get, it's a mixed match. So anytime there's no cooperation in those executives, it's the athletes that suffer. If you pass that hurdle, right, God forbid you pass that hurdle, yes, you then have to really start with a strategic plan as to where you want your NGB to be. We, from very early, we said we wanted to be one of the top 5 sports in Trinidad within the next 10 years. That was our goal. We also said we want to produce a top 150 player by the year 2025. All right? We're getting there.
How we looking at that?
No, we're getting there.
Right.
You're getting there. But we now have to put all the things in place to make sure that we can give a push. So, have a good executive, have a strategic plan. Where a lot of executives fall down is the execution of it. You have to understand that most of these executives, they are voluntary, right? So sometimes, people may come in with the best of intentions. They really want to make a difference, but this is voluntarism. So if you have work commitments, and then you have the NGB commitments, and the work is paying you, this is your livelihood, which one you think is going to fall by the wayside?
So is it that it's not what you can gain from being part of this executive or the sport, but it's what you can give?
What you can give. This, as I tell everybody, this is a labor of love. I come from a business background, and really, when I first came in, I said, if my kids, because I have a 13-year-old who plays as well, I said, if they're going to stay in this sport, I need to make sure that there's a pathway for kids to develop, and that is how I really got in. That's how I really got involved. There must be a clear pathway for these kids to develop.
You said it's voluntary, but now we are looking at sport as an industry,
right.
Sport as a business. How can persons becoming involved in sport see sport as a business opportunity, being something that's financially stable and sustainable?
Correct. So we have to develop the ecosystem of sports, right? The industrial sports. Traditionally, not only in Trinidad, but in the Caribbean, sports is something people do when they're not good in academics, right? So
there's always that stigma attached.
That is the stigma. And if it is you have parents who put that first, or they don't understand the potential of the sport, then you're always going to run into that problem,
As an executive member of an NGB, it's a big role. As a president, you will have your time tied up a lot there.
Yes.
And now as a director at Sportt TT.
Yes.
Does one enhance the other, or does it take away from another role?
Well, I think I'm able to see both sides of the coin now. Sometimes people are able to only see what is in front of them. I remember before I was a director on Sport Company, and I was just dealing with the NGB, I had a specific direction. Sorry. So I would have seen from one side what was happening. So, I couldn't understand how some of the decisions were being made, right? I couldn't understand the communication, So me being a customer, because at that point the NGB is the customer to the Sport Company, when I came onto the board of sport, I was able to now articulate, how it is. So it definitely enhances, and it really lends to us understanding what NGBs go through, because not only myself, we have other directors who are heads of NGBs. Douglas Camacho, he was head of TTOC at one point, and he's head of hockey, and we have people who are into cricket. We have Jeffrey Gillen. We have quite a few people who are into sports. You have Marilyn Gordon, who was the first Minister of Sport in Trinidad and Tobago, believe it or not. So I must say the constitution of this board is very good, but it is good that I can see both sides. So on the NGB side, I'm able to communicate better to them to say, listen, this is why we are doing so and so, because they may not understand. And then on the board side, I'm able to articulate from an NGB's perspective what we need to do and what we need to improve.
I think you're in a perfect position because
Yes.
You're the president of an NGB,
Yes.
you're a director in Sport TT,
Yes.
and you're also a parent of athletes.
Yes.
So you see all facets of the ecosystem.
Yes, I see all facets. I see all facets, and what is important is to get the balance, what I try to tell my kids, even before I went on, is the fact that we have to give back. If you are seeing something in society that you can help, you need to step forward. Too often a lot of people just stay back. We call them armchair politicians. You sit down here and they can tell you everything that's wrong. They can tell you what needs to be done, but they don't come out and participate. And I think if more good people who are genuine about whatever they do, it doesn't have to be sport or whatever, get involved, I think we're going to see a difference in the community.
Recently concluded a T20 World Cup. We saw the West Indies exit in the first round, or the round of 12.
Yes.
And some persons, I think people are growing to accept this, that the end of a T20 era is now upon us.
Yes.
Those individuals that have been starring for the last decade and a half,
Yes.
they've been fed through a developmental program from the
Yes.
2005 to 2010 era. How can NGB play a role in developing future stars?
Development is key to any sport, regardless of the sport, whether it is cricket, football, hockey, basketball. Development is key. NGBs have to have a sustained development program, and they have to look at what they call talent identification, because you have to identify talent. You have to be able to put these talented athletes into a stream or a system that can help nurture and develop them. And there must be succession planning. That is the thing. So you have to always have a mixture of youth with experience. You have to give the youth a chance. A good example is in our last tournament, right? This is where we send the senior team, right? This is for the Davis Cup. We had experience and we had youth. And you have to have the mix. The youth has to be able to learn from the experienced people. That's the only way. So you must have a robust development plan, and you must have a clear pathway for these athletes to move forward, or else they might think, well, what am I training for?
We're also seeing a trend in which there's almost a starvation of younger athletes, especially at the grassroots level,
Yeah.
village level.
Village.
How do we get this to improve? Because it's difficult, because we now in the pandemic, it seems as though it's never ending.
Yeah.
And we are into the video game or virtual
Yeah.
realm now, and
Yeah.
it's almost embedded in every young person.
Yes.
How do we get them involved in sport, especially at the village level?
I think people didn't understand when we saw sports merge with community development, and I think really it's a perfect merger, right? Because we have to get out into the communities to find these athletes. Let's look at Keyshawn Walcott. Keyshawn is from Toko. If there wasn't some program that was able to identify that talent at that point in time, we wouldn't have that gold medal from Keyshawn. So really, NGBs, it has to be a structured approach, right? There are two things with the village level. You have the community level, and then you have the schools, because you have the schools that exist in communities, right? So there must be a structured approach as to how we go into the schools, how we go into the communities. I remember traveling abroad, and I looked at a field, I was passing through this place, and there was a field. Just imagine there are 10 football fields, right? 10 football, they call it soccer. They
Yes.
have 10 football fields, and all are lit, right? And at every field, I saw a different age group of kids playing. So I'm talking to the person I'm traveling with. I say, what's going on here? So they're saying, well, in this community, each community has a field, right? Has this. And they have after-school programs in every sport. So understand what I'm telling you. And this was football. So at you have 10 fields, and this is at night. And every field is a different age group, and there's development happening at every field. There's a joke going on. If you look at the fields in Trinidad after hours, the only things that benefiting really are the cows and the goats right now, right? One, COVID has caused that, and two, the NGBs need to be more structured in how they approach, and they need to partner. They need to partner with either businesses in the area. They need to partner with the Ministry of Sport and Community Development to create programs to go into the communities.
But some persons viewing may argue the point that it's up to the responsibility of the regional corporations to take care of these facilities, and that the NGBs, they don't have the funding to do it themselves. So how does one tie into NGBs linking with regional corporations for maintenance of these village facilities? We're not talking about the major facilities such as this one at the tennis
fields
center.
in the area.
Yeah, the fields in the various communities. How does one mesh that?
There must be communication. So you must have a person in the area. You must know who the representatives are in the areas. Remember, we put them there. We put them there. We have to make sure we get what we want out of it. So
Indeed.
there must be communication, whether you have village councils, you have community councils, you have parliamentary person in the area. You need to articulate and have a conversation and get it done. Because it's very easy to sit back and say, well, is community development has to do that, or the Port of Spain Corporation has to do that. But you have a responsibility as a person, as a Trinidadian, as a taxpayer, to demand what it is you want.
Going back to the pandemic situation, there have been a lot of downtime, give or take 2 years, for NGBs to get their affairs or quote unquote their act together.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for these NGBs before the pandemic? Well, as we're talking, it seems a never ending, right?
Yes.
But
yes,
the downtime will continue for a little while again. What advice do you have for them to get themselves in order before we return back to the playfields and the stadiums?
Yeah, I think right now, we saw a lot of NGBs doing a lot of online stuff, which is great, trying to encourage the kids, but at some point there must be some physical activity. For us, what I would recommend is that they use this time to develop the non-sexy part of the business, right, which is all the paperwork. This is the strategic planning, putting the processes in place, having discussions with or seeking new sponsors.
Oh yes.
Having those kinds of conversations and trying to communicate and make sure, putting your team together as to your rollout, how you're going to roll things out. So use the downtime, yes. Communicate with your parents, communicate with your athletes, communicate with those who you want to be involved with, and roll it out. I would also suggest that, a lot of these athletes right now they're living a kind of sedentary lifestyle, which is they're sitting down, they're not active, and you need to bring it out gradually. So once we open up, you can't just run out on the fields and play like we don't stop, because that will lead to injury, right? We have seen it.
Oh yes.
So we have to gradually bring our athletes back out, have the programs, make sure the coaches understand that, because everybody be excited to come out, but make sure the coaches understand that it must be a gradual process, and just get your back end in order.
If you just joined us, you are viewing Sport Views right here, and we are chatting with Director Mitchell, and we're talking about facilities, about NGBs, about everything as it pertains to his expertise in sport. Yes. And we want to go back to the facilities, and you made the point earlier that Trinidad and Tobago has the greatest per capita in terms of facilities. Yes. How easy or how difficult is it to manage these facilities? It's a lot.
Yeah. There's an old HR saying, right? Form follows function, right? So, for instance, once Sportt has the structure in place, we can manage anything, right? So, based on what the form is, what our function is, what they need us to do, we then put structures in place. What we've started to do is incorporate technology into the facilities, right? Because as more and more facilities come on board, it's going to be a lot more difficult to manage the footprints. So right now, on the committee that I chair, which is the Projects and Facilities Committee, we are looking at adding a lot more technology into it. So you're talking about remote viewing, you're talking about data, using big data now to manage a lot of this stuff. To manage the facilities as well, you must have a budget, right? Because it all comes down to dollars and cents.
Oh, yes.
Right? We could have the most grandiose plans, but at the end of the day, it's a facility, it's a government-owned facility, so we depend right now on the subventions by the government. And Sportt is in a position right now where we cannot retain funds. So for instance, let's look at Hazy Crawford, right? When Marshall had his Marshall Monday and for Carnival Fets and all those things, we'll charge and say, yes, but no, the money that comes goes into a fund of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, right? And Sportt does not have access to it. So as much money as we generate, right, we do not have access to it. So where's that money supposed to go back to maintaining facilities? That's not the case right now.
Which leads to my question of the link between that fund and the maintenance of these facilities. Is that a discussion that needs to be had now? Because moving forward, we are now seeing the various facilities being accredited. More money for sure will be generated by these facilities to become self-sufficient. And this is the optimum goal. So how do we approach this now? How does the Sportt TT approach this accessing of this fund to ensure that these facilities are maintained properly?
Right. So Sportt has already started that conversation a while ago. Right, even under the previous minister before the Honorable Champa Kudjo, that conversation was started because if you look at facilities away, you'll have the American Airlines Arena, or you'll have the Staples Stadium, right, and those are called naming rights, right. So that whole naming rights, which is big, right, in the U.S. And in every other part of the world, it is a conversation that we've had. With the Ministry of Finance, because it has to change. Sportt in its construct, how Sportt is constructed, it has to have an act of parliament to change what we can and cannot do. Right? So right now, because of how it's constructed, we cannot do that. So parliament has to change some acts within that for us to be able to retain the money to use for management and maintenance of the facilities. But yes, that maintenance, and remember, it's also motivational too, because if it is we're able to generate money and we're able to keep that money for maintenance of the facilities, that is what is needed. We should not have to be able to then go back and hope that the government then gives us, how much ever million we need. I'll give you an example. Sportt would put through a budget to maintain all these facilities, probably, let's say, upwards of 200 million a year. Right? I mean, and this is just bare minimum, right? This is what we need to do. We have security, you have maintenance, you have to, Sportt will get 68 million. So we are saying that we need 200 plus million to maintain these facilities, and you get 68 million when 68 million when probably 3/4 of that may be salaries.
Yeah.
You understand? So where's the money going? Where's the money for the NGB development? Where's the money for maintenance of the facilities? So unless there's a line item on the budget that says maintenance of facilities XYZ, then we just don't have it. So
you made a great point about these international facilities being named and the naming rights. Do you see those sorts of arrangements coming to Trinidad, let's say within the next 5 years? Because we're looking for sport tourism, the development of the sporting ecosystem, and I think Sportt TT, they're really trying their very best to make sure this ecosystem is a very sustainable one. Do you see this a possibility?
This under the present Minister Champa Kudjo, we had a meeting up to last week. This is a chairman, myself and other directors. Right, and this is where we drove home that point, and she's very much on board with that, because that is the only way where we can get income. Without that, that is a major part of getting income. So the present minister is on board. I know there is a paper in front of them. This is the cabinet in terms of colleagues. I know what needs to be done. So we just wait for the feedback, but that's what needs to be done.
Now, as we have asked so many other persons being interviewed on this wonderful show, it's a segment where we get to know each other,
Yes.
one, and then we get to really give an autopsy of everything that's ongoing right now behind the scenes while
Right.
the pandemic situation unfolds yet again.
Right.
Where do you think our facilities stand in the year 2022? How would they progress in the year 2022?
I think Trinidad is in a unique position. You know, we have over 200 million, actually it's 2 billion, sorry, in assets on the ground. That's the value of our sporting assets, 2 billion, right? So for any country in this region to try to ramp up to meet that, it's not going to happen. So we're in a unique position, all right? During this pandemic, you know, we really need to focus on what our strategic objectives are. What is the strategic direction of Trinidad and Tobago, whether it is the sport and tourism, you know, because sport tourism is a subset of tourism, because you have ecotourism, you have, you know, whatever, medical tourism, and sport is a subset of that, you know. So that in itself, we need to, as a country, we need to have our strategic plan. We need to make sure that everybody's on board, everybody understands what needs to be done in this downtime, so that when we open up, right, we're able to open up with a bang, you know, and we're not just now trying to figure out, well, what to do. You know, we need to use this time now, put the plans in place, start to execute them, you know, because that is where, I mean, as a Trinidadian, that is where we fall down. The execution is the problem. We could plan, you know, analysis paralysis. You say paralysis by analysis. Yeah, we're good at that,
yes.
man. We could do that, but is the execution is what will make the difference.
And how can we improve that execution? Is it that we encourage persons involved in multi-million-dollar business and they're very successful in managing these businesses and in terms of their execution of their plans, which is almost similar to the execution of plans in sport? Do we ask them for advice and ask them to come on board?
Well, yeah, I think the future of sport in Trinidad, the sporting industry, is private-public partnerships. You know, no man is an island. We have very bright people in business here. You know, I think the thing with sport before is that, you know, you would have had a lot of sports that would have been in the media for the wrong reason. So what you find is people in the business community kind of staying away a little bit because you don't want to be associated with that brand. One of the things that this board has tried to do, and I think we've done it successfully, is to change the conversation. Right? There's a lot of stuff happening in the background. We're doing a lot of good work in the background. And once the public sees that, then they're better able to come on board and partner with sport, partner with the ministry to get Trinidad where we need to be.
You know, in the position in the seat of Mr. President. Mr. President, how do we move sport forward in the year 2022? Let's say the pandemic comes to an end miraculously in January 2022. What are the plans from the tennis perspective for the sport moving forward in 2022?
So, the first thing for us is to develop the calendar of events. You know, as I told somebody just last week, right? The aim of the Tennis Association is to have an international event every month from 2022, every month, right? So what does that mean, right? That means that we have to work with the ITF, which we are doing right now. We have to develop those events. We then have to advertise it. We then have to think. So our aim is every month to have an event in Trinidad. We talk about sport tourism.
Oh yes.
Right, there you go. The other part of it is that we are quite excited because with this whole structural development to make here an ITF training center, we're going to have permanent staff because you have to have staff. And that staff is not only for the center, but it's to make sure that tennis as a whole develops in the country. So we are quite excited about that. So, you know, a lot of sports, you cannot develop a sustainable organization without staff, without people who are there day in, day out doing it. It can be volunteerism, you know, and a lot of facilities that has to be done. So for us, we are developing right now our calendar of events. You know, ITF wrote us just 2 weeks ago asking us which events we want. but we are tempered right now because, right now the racket center is a step-down facility.
Yes.
And we understand that, the safety and security of the people of Trinidad and Tobago comes first.
Indeed.
Right? However, we are not going to wait until they say, okay, when Dr. Miriam Richards says, okay, Mr. Mitchell, you could go ahead, or Telsport, you could go ahead, and then we now starting to plan. No, we're having the plans in place. We're developing it right now. So as things are released, we're able to execute. And that's what the planning is important. 2022, 2023 is going to be big for us. I mean, 2019 was our biggest year in tennis. We got an award from the ITF for tennis development in this region, and that is because we put on so many events and we had so much development happening in Trinidad. And we're just going to take up the battle from where we left off and continue to 2020, 21, 22 and beyond.
That was Mr. President.
Yes.
Now as Mr. Director of Sportt TT,
yes.
What are the expectations of Sportt TT in the year 2022? Is it similar?
Yeah, I mean, Sportt is going to be more focused on athletes and the NGBs, NGB development. I mean, most of our board meetings now center around how do we get NGBs? How do we assist NGBs? Given our limited budget, because we have a budget constraint. But on the sports side, we are looking to see how best we can help NGBs move forward, right?
On a bit of a lighter note, we discussed so much things from
yes.
executive positions to various accreditation.
Right.
On your perspective, do you see sport being a very profitable industry in the next 5 years in Trinidad?
It is.
We're talking from a fan perspective here.
From a fan perspective, okay. Trinidad has so much up right now that I get excited each time I talk to people. I have to contain my excitement there, right? But from the facilities, we have world-class facilities, right? We have world-class human resources down here. We just have to put it together. We just have to put it together. We have to have, a lot of industries operate in silos. So let's look at the ministries. Everybody has to be on the same page. So you have Ministry of Tourism, you have Ministry of Culture. I mean, all these have to come together when you're putting on an event, or if it is you want to drive sport tourism in Trinidad and Tobago. Once we are able to bring everybody together, there's no limit for Trinidad and Tobago. There's no limit. Just
quickly for the persons viewing, they are now seeing thousands of persons around the world attending various sporting events.
Mm-hmm.
Give them some encouragement that this too shall come to Trinidad in the very near future.
It come in. No, but really, no. We'll always be guided by the ministry, and the government in terms of what they say, right? We have to do that. But you can see a gradual resumption of sports. We had a meeting again with the minister, and she's very much on board in trying to open things up. Keeping to the guidelines, but open things up into whether it is team sports, non-contact sports, contact sports, because we recognize the importance that sport plays in the society and building a society. It is coming. Beware.
Director Mitchell, I really want to thank you very much for sparing some time with us today and sharing your expertise as Mr. President
yes.
and of course as Mr. Director.
Yes.
It's been an honor having you on the show today.
Well, it was a pleasure, Sachin, and before I asked him, clearly his parents were into cricket because they named Sachin, right? I'm not too sure how great your skills are, but hopefully.
It was there. I may have some regrets not pursuing it some more, but it was there. Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, Director.
Look forward to it.
A real pleasure. Real pleasure indeed.
Thanks a lot.
Folks, you are viewing this Sport Views on Sport in Trinidad and Tobago, a production of the Sportt Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited and TTT Limited. I'm Sachin Ramsubag. Thanks a lot for watching. Until next time, bye for now.